Well, if you have just joined in, we welcome you to the show as we kick off this morning doing analysis on the State of the Nation address by the President of South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa, and we're going straight across to be joined by political analysts, and we're joined by Hlumelo Xaba. Hlumelo, good morning to you, and welcome to the show.
Good morning to you, Inayet, and to the viewers, and thank you very much for having me.
Yes, as we await you to come on screen, there we go. We've got you. Shomelo, clearly when we talk about the SONA, it is obviously a huge event. It is waited with bated breath by the nation as well. And we've come, over the years, we've seen President Cyril Ramaphosa as well, and in his second term as the president as well. So he's a very, very familiar face, but I think when one looks at some of the issues that obviously come out, clearly it was, some described it, and as I mentioned in my introduction, a masterclass in political crowd pleasing. Now, we know that generally with the State of the Nation address, it's very densely packed and also very, very ambitious. So, just your initial take. And as we delve into a lot more detail and look at some of the major takeaways from this year's SONA address, just what are some of your thoughts, Chumelo?
Well, in my view, and the sentiment that I held going into the State of the Nation address is what's going to be different in this State of the Nation address compared to the ones that have preceded it, in that the State of the Nation address has now become, of late, a gathering of the political elite whereby they just come to parade and show off their gowns and everything like that. In essence, I always say that it sometimes becomes nothing short of a Durban July of a political magnitude, you understand, because you'll find that people just go and gather, and then subsequently after that, nothing much changes on the ground. But moving on to answering your question, I think that if you can look at some of the things that President Ramaphosa highlighted, you will realize that he tried to actually tick some of the boxes or highlight some of the positive things that were actually achieved by his administration in the previous year. For instance, there is economic growth, as marginal as it is, because it hasn't really hit that 1% on a quarter to quarter basis, because I think in the first quarter it grew by 0.1, 0.9, and then 0.5, which puts us at an average of about 1.3, of between 1.3 to 1.5 economic growth. However, one thing that the president admitted to also was that we have not yet reached a level whereby we can actually be able to alleviate poverty as well as create jobs, which is a 3%, which is the 3% mark that we need to reach as a country. And also the removal of South Africa from the grey list is something that was also highlighted by the president. So he did highlight the positives. But my real contention in regards to this is, yes, there are these strides that are being made by his government. However, they are not really translating to the changing of ordinary South Africans' lives, because yes, there is economic growth. Yes, we have been removed from the grey list. Yes, we are now getting more and more. We are managing to get duty-free access to certain markets, alternatively to the US, because of our tensions with them. However, my real question is, how can these things then be turned to change the lives of ordinary South Africans on the ground? Because people who are suffering on the ground don't really relate to some of the things that are happening at a macroeconomic level or at a national level. Yes, someone that like me and you can actually commend some of these things. However, they haven't really brought tangible changes to the lives of ordinary South Africans. So I think that the president did try to actually sway us in that view to show that there is something good that is happening. However, for ordinary South Africans, that's not something that they can really relate to, because it hasn't really translated to tangible outcomes that can change the quality of their lives. For instance, we are sitting now at an unemployment rate of approximately 40%, which is a skyrocketing statistic for me, because if you can compare it to other administrations, you'll realize that this unemployment rate that we're currently faced with as a country now is far, far, far above the average unemployment rate that we used to experience in years that preceded President Ramaphosa's two administrations. So for me, I think that there wasn't really much to write home about insofar as how tangible have the positive things that have been happening in the country impacted ordinary South Africans. And then lastly, I think that he mentioned a lot about he highlighted mentioned a lot about the water crisis that is currently ongoing in the country, particularly in parts of Gauteng. But what I did in this instance is that I tried to juxtapose what he's going to say about the water crisis with what he said last year. He mentioned something last year about establishing ring-fenced mechanisms that are going to be professionally managed to ensure that there's adequate water and electricity in various metros or municipalities around the country. However, fast forward to this year, you can look at the state of water infrastructure. You can look at the state of Johannesburg currently. You will realize that there's little to nothing that has been done to salvage these problems. Instead, now he says that there'll be a national water crisis committee, which is going to be chaired by him, which just goes to show that there hasn't really been any solutions that have been, any measures, sorry, that have been taken to ensure that this water crisis is combated by his government. So a lot of some of the things that he said, apart from the economic growth, are still yet to be changed. There hasn't really much that has changed in so far as our local government sphere is concerned, and particularly when it comes to water shortages and water reduction, because that's one thing aspect of his State of the Nation address that I wanted to actually pay attention to, given what he said last year and the amount and the billions of rands that he had actually committed were going to be invested by the government in municipalities. And he even mentioned the fact that last year he mentioned the fact that local government needs to his government is going to work with local government with various local government agencies to ensure that there is adequate service delivery. But fast forward to this year, nothing much has changed in the local government sphere. So it just goes to show that nothing much has changed in the ordinary lives of South Africans, because for you to actually be able to measure the quality of life or rather the impact that a government has on the average South African, you need to actually measure the quality of services that they receive from their municipalities. And up until now, there isn't really much that has changed.
Well, certainly, Hlumelo, and I think one can understand that no 2 years can be the same, and each year presents new challenges. But it's become a all too familiar sight where we are visiting the same issues over and over again, whether we're talking about economic recovery, economic growth, we're talking about crime. And this year I know he focused a lot on organized crime networks as well, service deliveries, and also the whole question surrounding major reforms. Now, we are in an election year, local government elections. The key issue here is accountability, and it appears as if nobody is being held accountable.
Well, I think one thing that we should also take cognizance of is that President Cyril Ramaphosa at this juncture seems to be acting out of pressure in some of the things that he articulated yesterday. For instance, the deployment of the SANDF in parts of the Western Cape and Gauteng, in my view, are actually good steps, but he's now acting out of pressure because you must remember that this is a local government election year, like you just alluded to now. And secondly, he's not so far away from his tenure will be ending soon, because we must also keep in mind that his incumbency or him finishing his term as head of state is actually under threat, because there's an ANC national conference that is taking place next year, which means that the outcome of that conference may actually affect him finishing his tenure as head of state, because historically in the ANC, we do know that if when a new leadership comes in, more especially if it's a new leadership that is anti the current income the current incumbent, the president usually doesn't finish his term. We saw it with President Zuma. We saw it with President Thabo Mbeki. So I think that his incumbency is also under threat because of the political environment or rather the turbulent environment within his political party. So taking those things into cognizance, I think that he now knows that he actually needs tread carefully insofar as delivering on his promises as well as acting in a manner that is going to be pleasing to the public. Hence, we even now see that he wants to even he's speaking a lot about dismantling criminal syndicates and also taking cognizance of the recommendations that are made in the Madlanga Commission, because there have been a lot of commissions that we've had in the country, yet little to nothing has been done insofar as following up on or rather taking measures on the findings and the recommendations that were made by those commissions. He himself was the one to which the Zondo Commission report was handed to, but there hasn't really been any steps that have been taken to ensure that the people that have been implicated in the wrongdoing there are actually held accountable and also take responsibility for their actions. So I think now what I'm sensing is that there is some sort of a pressure that the president is actually that is exerted on the president, which is now making him to actually act in a way that is going to please the public, also hoping that he can restore the credibility of the ANC, then also just to redeem himself as a president, because we do know that President Ramaphosa's presidency, since he became president, hasn't really been the best. It has actually been marred by a lot of shortcomings and failures, to say the least. So I think all of this now actually just goes to show that we have a president that is trying to do right and also trying to redeem himself from everything that he has always been criticized of.
Talk about the credibility and the president trying to redeem himself. And we know that he is not going to serve another term in office. But the key issue here is in redeeming himself and considering what we heard at the State of the Nation address yesterday. Time obviously is of the essence. And I'm sure time is running out. And does he have the time to actually redeem himself?
Well, I think that's a very good question, Nayet, because like I mentioned, that there are a lot of political events in the next 12 months or year in the next year or so that are going to determine whether President Cyril Ramaphosa has enough time or not, because you must remember that the next election is just 3 years away. However, like I mentioned to you, that the internal party dynamics within the ANC may also put his incumbency or him finishing his tenure at risk, meaning that he doesn't really have enough time to implement some of the things that he has promised to implement over a long period of time. For instance, things such as combating crime, things such as reducing the unemployment rate, and things such as actually restoring public order in South Africa are things that have always been ventilated to him and flagged to him in order for him to actually combat. But like I mentioned to you, that he has done little to nothing in order to combat some of these problems. So now his time is actually racing against him to ensure that he restores public confidence and also restore himself as a president. Because remember, if you can notice, you will realize that South African presidents, or let me rather say, with the exception of President Thabo Mbeki, always tried to actually do all the good things that they had promised in their term only in the last segments of their tenure. You'll remember even with President Zuma that he only started to actually entertain the issue of free education in the latter parts of his term. Even when it came to the land expropriation discourse, he only came to or the ANC as a whole only came to entertain it in the latter parts of President Zuma's term. So I'm sensing the same trend now with President Ramaphosa, in that he's trying to do all of the things that were expected of him during his tenure only in the latter parts of his term, because he is now in the latter parts of his term, if we are being honest, considering some of the things that I alluded to just now, meaning that there isn't really enough time for him to implement some of these things. So hence he's now acting out of pressure and also realizing that he's running out of time in order to actually restore his presidency and even restore public trust.
Yes, and also I think what is important to understand is we are looking at challenges across all areas, and in order to redeem himself, specific actions need to be taken. Local government, we are in an election year for local government elections, and I know there was a lot of discussion at length with regard to performance of municipalities, of local governments, and also at the same time looking at many other areas. We see what's playing out in the Madlanga Commission. We're talking about reforms right across the entire spectrum. So it's not only about service delivery; it's reforms right across the entire spectrum, and particularly looking at ordinary South Africans and how they have been affected by all of this as well. Besides all the other shenanigans that seem to be playing out, and I think it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, we've had now some insight as to what a government of national unity looks like in South Africa. We've had some experience as well. And this could easily, we know that it is starting to play out a lot also at local government. The key issue here is putting politics before the people. And for me, this is absolutely critical because what we've seen in the past as well, even at local government election as well, political loyalty seems to be paramount ahead of what the needs of the people are, Hlumelo.
Well, something that President Ramaphosa alluded to yesterday, I think he actually wanted to paint the current administration as one that is actually acting beyond party lines and also acting for the good, for the betterment of the public without actually allowing political, or rather their political differences, to impede on the services and even the service that needs to be delivered to the public. So, however, I think that there is more to what he said to what meets the eye, because we do know that between the ANC and the DA, there are a lot of tensions that tend to arise quite frequently. We saw last year with the budget vote. I wonder what's going to happen this year with this year's budget vote, whether or not the DA is actually going to have differences with the ANC, is going to have differences with the ANC insofar as supporting them when it comes to adopting the budget. So there have been, when it comes to coalition politics, one thing that you need to keep in mind is that South Africa is still foreign to the concept of coalitions, and we have seen what is happening at a local government level, whereby you have political parties not being able to actually put their political differences aside and work for the greater good of the public, which is something that has also hamstrung service delivery, particularly in the metros such as Johannesburg, Tshwane, in Nelson Mandela Bay, and Ekurhuleni. However, we have seen some sort of stability over the past 12 months in that there haven't really been any leadership changes, when any political change, any changes in the political leadership of these particular municipalities. But when it comes to service delivery, that's where the challenge then comes in, whereby does the stability in governance actually translate to adequate service delivery? So I think it's important that political parties continue to navigate coalition politics beyond party lines and ideological differences, but to actually place the greater good of the public, to actually put the greater good of the public and the interest thereof at the center of everything beyond party lines. And I think that is what we have been witnessing, even at a municipality like Tshwane, for instance. We see what's happening in KZN, for example, whereby you have one political party that is dictating who gets what in the NFP. So I think that at a national level, they are still trying to navigate how this coalition is going to work, because I usually don't like characterizing the current government as a government of national unity. We know what a government of national unity is, and we know how that concept came about. So currently, we just have a multi-party coalition of 10 political parties that are working together. As a matter of fact, it's two political parties, because even if other political parties may leave this partnership, the ANC and the DA will still be able to constitute a government that to constitute a government together without needing any assistance from other political parties. So I think that in essence, it's the ANC and the DA's it's the ANC and the DA that are in a way holding the glue to this government, holding out the glue that makes this government stick together, because a difference between these two parties actually does subsequently lead to something that may actually affect the entire government. We saw with the budget vote last year, as I alluded to earlier on.
Finally, Hlumelo, what does this all mean for the ANC and the future of the ANC? Because it has been a party in decline for a very long time. And how much confidence would an address like this actually put on those that obviously that have traditionally supported the ruling party?
Well, one thing that I always say is that the ANC is currently in a phase of decline. now, and I doubt that they will actually recover from the decline that is currently confronting them. Because if you can notice in previous elections, both local government elections and provincial and national elections, you will realize that the ANC never really recovers its electoral support in places where it has declined. If you can check the electoral trends from 2011 or 2009 rather, up until the previous election, both in local government and the general elections, you will realize that the ANC has been declining perpetually. And I think that currently the main problem that is the ANC is faced with is that a lot of problems that ordinary South Africans are faced with, things such as poor service delivery, things such as corruption, which is one of the obstacles that are hindering good governance and service delivery in our country, are attributed to the ANC and to them not being able to actually govern adequately. So all of this now leads to public distrust between us as ordinary South Africans and the ANC, which is what has ultimately led to its decline over a long period of time. So I think that currently the ANC is in a phase whereby no matter what can happen, but we will not really see a change in terms of their electoral support, or in terms of them actually gaining some of its electoral support. Because in as much as President Ramaphosa is trying to restore law and order, but a lot of what he has done in his term, there isn't really much to write about insofar as what the positive things that he has achieved from 2019 or up until this point, or 2018 rather, up until the point that we are in now. So I do actually firmly believe that the ANC is likely to continue experiencing a perpetual decline insofar as electoral support is concerned.
Well, Shomela, we're going to have to leave it at that. As always, we do appreciate you taking time out for us here at Salam Media, and I'm sure we will be having a lot more discussions going into the future. It is going to be quite a critical year as well, and I'm sure a lot that we will be calling on you as well. And as we head towards the elections as well, and it's going to be interesting to see, more importantly, in terms of deliverables, and how do we measure the SONA against what the government and what Cyril Ramaphosa has been actually saying, and how that is translated into action. But for now, all the best to you, sir. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you.
Hlumelo Xaba joining us this morning, political analyst. Some of the key eight takeaways from Cyril Ramaphosa's State of the Nation address. We're going to be staying with the SONA as well, and we are going to be taking a look at housing crisis in focus, and we're talking with the Sheikh Dwellers movement, how and their reaction to the State of the Nation address. A quick break, and we'll be back.